So last year at the Game Awards, we had one of the most unexpected announcements of all time, and that was a sequel to the original Okami. And Okami was always one of those video game series that was always sort of stuck in cult status limbo. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a series. We only have the original game and one spin-off. And one of the reasons why it's such a cult classic is that while it is a good game, it completely flopped when it came out in 2006. And I blame that mostly on the timing of things. You know, the game released late into the PlayStation 2's life cycle, right at the start of the 7th generation of consoles. And again, you have to really understand the mindset of gamers back then. This was at a point in time when games were starting to look super realistic, and people wanted to dive headfirst into online team deathmatch based shooters. And again, Okami, while being a fantastic game with one of the most iconic and amazing art styles out there, was kind of doomed to be a failure just based on the fact that it was releasing for a previous console generation. I think Capcom would have benefited if they held this game back a year and kind of released it later for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. But guess what? It was a good game, and people noticed it was a good game. And you can bet your ass that Capcom noticed it was a good game because they re-released Okami on every console imaginable, and they even ported it to the PC. And guess what? Over time, it became a sleeper hit. It became a success story post-launch way into the future. And so that got me thinking, if Okami can get a sequel, what other amazing games can get a sequel to? Because there are plenty of video games out there that are completely amazing that never launched into a franchise or their own series. And that's what this list is dedicated to. But before I break down all of my picks, I gotta get the shameless self-promotion out of the way. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the Gaming Grappler. Every little bit helps. The more these videos do, the more content I'll be able to deliver to you guys on a consistent and regular basis. You gotta keep in mind, I work a full-time job and I kind of work on these on the side. So again, the better these videos do, the more I can give you on a frequent basis. And with that being said, with all that shameless shilling out of the way, let's start my list. The first game I'm going to cover is right in the thumbnail because I like to jump right into the meat and potatoes of my content, and that is Vanquish. And oh my god, the original Vanquish launched in 2010, and that is over 15 years ago. I cannot believe that Vanquish is that old. But with that being said, the passage of time has been incredibly kind to Vanquish, especially on PC. This has basically turned into one of those games that can run on every modern machine imaginable. The footage that you're looking at right now is 60 FPS, and it was recorded on a laptop. And again, Vanquish ended up being such a cult classic because it was such a Molotov cocktail to generic cover-based third-person shooters. It added style, speed, and flair to your typical console shooter. Sam's augmented reaction suit is probably the coolest thing since Iron Man. It is debatably cooler than Iron Man's suit, but I don't want to start a flame war in the comments right now. The augmented reaction suit allows the player to rocket boost from one end to the map to the other in seconds, and it even gives you a Max Payne bullet time effect. But the key detail here is that both of these features, moving fast and slowing down time, are shared on the same meter. And what that means is that it forces the player to manage their resources effectively. If you don't manage those resources well, you're going to be stuck engaging with cover-based mechanics. I kind of find that funny that Vanquish operates at such a fast pace that one of the bad things that can happen to you in this game is being forced to play a generic third-person shooter. And that's cool to me. So one of the reasons why I think this game could benefit from a sequel is a few things. I don't like fighting robots. Your main enemy force in Vanquish is robots, and they're kind of generic looking, and I don't think they're that satisfying to beat in combat. Another thing that the game could benefit from is a jump button. I kind of feel like if you could jump in the air and do your rocket boost in midair, it would definitely open up the gameplay in a combat and would make the game better by default. And I think another reason why this game needs a sequel is just that the gaming landscape as a whole has changed. We have a lot of mainstream boomer shooters now. Games like Doom Eternal or other indie games like Ultra Kill and Turbo Overkill, which essentially lets you boost across the map for free whenever you want, means that gaming as a whole has gotten faster and I kind of want a sequel to Vanquish to show people how it's done. So again, that's the only thing I would want from a sequel to Vanquish. So I started the video talking about an iconic Clover game, and that was Okami. But what about the iconic Clover game? And that's God Hand. And I love God Hand's combat. And do not be fooled by God Hand's comedic style and tone. God Hand is one of the toughest games out there, and it has one of the most complicated hand-to-hand combat systems in all of gaming. You can customize every minute detail in Jeed's moveset, and every move in that moveset has a unique property to it that radically changes the gameplay. Some moves launch enemies into the air, others trip them, some crumple them, and some moves launch enemies into the air Team Rocket style. And all of these effects are vital to learning God Hand systems. Just like the Souls games, one-on-one encounters are tough but manageable, but face multiple enemies and you're in for a bad time. God Hand is all about managing crowds. In order to manage those crowds, you have to take advantage of all the properties in your moveset. Sometimes a good option is to launch an enemy into the air. Another one might be to send one airborne or to use your crumple effects or your trips. And the bosses in this game are iconic and amazing. So why did this game fail? Well, God Hand was one of those games that put all of its points into the gameplay. The graphics were not so good and were kind of hard to look at for a lot of gamers out there. And again, while I do think that the gameplay is the most important thing, from a marketing standpoint, you need to have a little budget to make your game more presentable to the masses. A God Hand 2 could seriously fix all of these problems and really bring to the masses just how amazing of a game it could be. So you really can't have a list about awesome games that never got a sequel without mentioning Rare as a studio. And again, I have ranted about that time and time again. We get it, Microsoft is an evil corporation, but I'm not going to put Banjo-Kazooie here because there's at least a Banjo-Tooie, so it has that going for it. But Conker's Bad Fur Day is one of the funniest games ever made. And I always thought that video games as a medium are perfect for exploring humor, and Conker was an avatar of that sort of feeling. Now, a lot of people will argue that the comedy of the original Conker's Bad Fur Day is dated with references that don't hit anymore or land anymore, but that's all the more reason why it should get a sequel. They can update the humor. Maybe in a sequel to Conker's Bad Fur Day, rather than focusing on parodying movies and stuff, they could focus on the game's own universe. Maybe just have it be about Conker fighting the Teddies or like a mad scientist, and just make the game funny in its own regard. There's just so much potential there for another Conker's Bad Fur Day game. And again, the gameplay style to Conker's Bad Fur Day is completely unique. It's like a mix of being a 3D mascot platformer and a third-person shooter rolled up into one package. And for whatever reason, it just works. It would have an online multiplayer game. There's just so much you can do with this series. But again, since Microsoft is run by complete idiots, it'll never happen. But I kind of wish we could at least get a sequel to Conker's Bad Fur Day. So the final game on this list is definitely me cheating, and that would be Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. And I get it. It's a spin-off game to an already established franchise, but it's definitely a one-of-a-kind type of deal. Like, I have never seen a spin-off game ever be as good as Metal Gear Rising. And I could fill out an entire video series on that game alone, so I'll just be brief here. Metal Gear Rising's story is like the perfect parody of Metal Gear Solid. It takes all of the themes and premises of Metal Gear and then blows them out of proportion and exaggerates them to fit the backdrop of an action game, and it just works. Like, there's always been this meta-narrative in Metal Gear about how Raiden is supposed to be an analog to the person who's playing the game. He's supposed to reflect a stealth player in Metal Gear Solid 2. And again, stealth gamers have a different sort of mindset. They want to take things slow. They want to see how the story plays out. And they also want to uncover conspiracies. But action gamers are crazy. Like, the average action gamer doesn't care about any of that. They want to kill everything on the screen that moves just because it activates the dopamine receptors in their head. And you actually see that mindset reflected in Raiden's character in the game, and it's just cool. The gameplay is admittedly a more simplified version of Devil May Cry. You can launch enemies into the air. There's multiple weapons, but you can't switch between them in combat. You have to go behind a pause screen, so that kind of sucks a bit. But again, that's one of the reasons why it would benefit from a sequel, is because you can really flesh those systems out more in detail. And again, one of the real reasons why Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is such an amazing game is that it is probably some of the best boss fights in character action history. Like right away from the first Metal Gear Ray to Jetstream Sam, who just kicks your ass and he has this hilarious shit-eating grin on the entire game, to Senator Armstrong, who's been immortalized as this meme. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance has some of the best boss fights imaginable. The pacing to the game is good, and I really want a sequel, but it's never going to happen because Platinum Games barely exists anymore and Kojima doesn't work at Konami. But if I could have it, that would be it, a sequel to Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. So that covers some of my overall picks to amazing video games that never got a sequel, but who knows, I could be wrong. Please leave a comment below about any amazing video game series that you grew up with or that you enjoy that never got a sequel for whatever reason. Maybe it bombed, maybe there's a licensing issue and that's why it never happened. I might even feature it in another video. With that being said, this is the Gaming Grappler. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time, everybody.